My sister banned me from her wedding. Yep, my own sister. The same one who danced at mine, toasted me like family should, and smiled for all the photos. All our friends and relatives were invited to hers. Everyone except me. My parents supported her decision completely. No hesitation, no questions. And you know what? I didn't cry. I just said, "All right." Then I quietly did something about it. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Kelly. She was sobbing. Because when the dust settled, she remembered what I'd always been to her built-in caretaker, the sister who had raised her as much as our parents did. From the moment we were little, everything in our house revolved around keeping Kelly happy. As the oldest, I wasn't just a big sister. I was her babysitter, her maid, her emotional punching bag. If she spilled something, I was the one who cleaned it. If she forgot homework, I stayed up fixing it. If she didn't want to walk home alone, I had to drop everything to go with her. Our parents called it being responsible. But what it really meant was that they didn't have the time or energy after work, so they just handed her off to me. I remember Mom coming home exhausted, tossing her purse on the counter, sighing, and saying she had nothing left to give. Then she'd ask me to read Kelly a bedtime story, as if I were another adult in the house instead of a kid myself. But Kelly didn't make it easy. Not even close, she was mean. She'd blurt out whatever cruel thought passed through her mind, and somehow I was always the one who had to clean up the fallout, like the time she crashed my best friend Mia's 13th birthday. Everyone brought little gifts we'd saved our allowance for. Mia opened each one with that bright, sweet gratitude that makes you love your friend even more. Then came the big present from her grandparents, a Barbie dream house. Sure, we were a bit old for Barbie, but Mia's eyes lit up. She was touched, and then, from across the room, Kelly giggled. Everyone turned, and she said loud enough for all to hear, "That's a stupid gift." The room went silent. Mia's smile froze. I wanted the ground to swallow me. I dragged Kelly out of there, cheeks burning, apologizing over and over. Back home, I asked her why she did it. She just shrugged and said, "I only said what everyone was thinking." It's not my fault she got offended. I stared at her, speechless, furious, embarrassed, disappointed. When I told my parents, hoping they'd at least explain that she'd crossed a line, they didn't scold her. They scolded me. They said I should never be ashamed of my sister, that maybe I should stop being friends with people who couldn't handle honesty. Honesty. That's what they called her cruelty. Looking back, I see it clearly now. They were gaslighting me, manipulating me into staying her protector, her shield, while she got to say and do whatever she wanted without consequence. As I got older, I started pushing back. Every time they tried to force me to babysit or drag her along, I refused. I told them Kelly could hang out with her own friends or they could keep an eye on her themselves. That I needed time for my own life. They accused me of being selfish, of trying to exclude her. Said I was a bad sister. Maybe I was. But only to someone who'd never learned basic kindness. Kelly didn't have friends because she pushed everyone away. She'd insult people under the banner of just being honest. No one wanted to sit with her at lunch, and somehow, that became my problem too. I remember my parents ordering me to let her sit with me and my friends. I didn't want to. My friends didn't either. But after enough guilt trips, I caved, and for years, that's how it went. Me cleaning up her messes, me taking the blame, me being the good sister, while she burned every bridge she crossed. College changed everything. My parents wanted me to stay close to home, but I worked hard, landed a scholarship, and got into a school hundreds of miles away on the East Coast. Mom begged me not to go. Said Kelly would miss me. Said I should be a good big sister. But I'd spent my whole life being that. So this time I left. Moving into that dorm felt like oxygen after years of suffocation. For the first time, I could breathe. No caretaking, no walking on eggshells. I never went home for long weekends. Not for breaks. Freedom tasted too sweet. We had a Facebook group for our old high school friends. Kelly was still in it. She'd tag along when I was younger, so she knew everyone. Sometimes she'd post in the group, asking if anyone wanted to meet up. No one ever replied. Sure, a few of us had moved away for college, but the ones who stayed in town still ignored her. That's when it hit me. They'd only tolerated Kelly because of me. Because my parents forced me to bring her everywhere. Once I wasn't around, there was no reason to keep pretending. I didn't blame them. She hadn't changed. She was still rude, still cruel, still honest. So the silence she heard online? She'd earned it. As for me and Kelly, we barely spoke anymore. Our bond had never been real, just something my parents built out of guilt and obligation. And if I'm being honest, I don't think she ever liked me either. She just liked having someone to lean on. Someone forced to stay, but not anymore. When I left home, we almost stopped messaging entirely. Sometimes my parents called with updates about her life and urged me to visit and spend time with Kelly. I ignored it. Senior year, I came home because we had a high school reunion. I was excited to see everyone and catch up. When Kelly found out, she announced that she wanted to go too, so she could hang out with my friends. This time I told her firmly that these were my high school friends, and she had no right to insert herself. My parents tried to argue, but I shut it down fast. Kelly needed to find her own friends and live her own life instead of trailing after me. We weren't kids anymore. I figured that settled it. At the reunion, I sank into the warm blur of nostalgia. We traded stories, remembered dumb pranks, and laughed over our old inside jokes. I was having a great time, right up until Kelly walked into their restaurant uninvited. I was stunned. I'd been crystal clear that I didn't want her involved, and she showed up anyway. Kelly came to Artable, and before I could say a word, chirped, "Oh, I missed you guys so much." The room went awkwardly quiet. People looked at me, then at her confused. No one was expecting her. Oblivious to the discomfort, Kelly dragged over a chair and started chatting about how long it had been. I could feel my temper rising as I watched her brazenly insert herself into my circle at an event where she wasn't invited. My friends tried to be polite and keep the conversation going, but you could read the discomfort on their faces, and we couldn't talk freely anymore. After lunch, I pulled Kelly aside and asked her to go home. She waved me off, said it was no big deal, and I needed to stop obsessing. These were her friends too. That breezy dismissal did it. I decided to teach her a lesson. We went back to the table and I addressed it in front of everyone so they could speak for themselves. And so my sister would finally understand how embarrassing she was being. I asked whether anyone thought it was normal for a younger sister to crash our reunion without an invite. To my relief, several friends backed me up and told Kelly it made them uncomfortable. They weren't close with her. My best friend tried to soften it and told Kelly they could meet some other day, but tonight was for former classmates only. Hearing that, Kelly flushed. And I'll admit, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, watching her finally learn something about boundaries. She shot me a nasty look, clearly blaming me for the fiasco, and left with her head down. That night, when I got home from the reunion, my parents pounced on me, saying I'd humiliated Kelly in front of everyone and thrown her out. I told them no one wanted her there, that she crashed our event without an invitation and owed me an apology. They kept insisting she was my sister, and I needed to be more understanding. Mom said Kelly always struggled to make friends. People didn't want to hang out with her, and she'd been excited to see me friends because they'd always been kind to her. I pushed back. I'd put up with Kelly for years, but those people were kind only because they were my friends, not hers, and they never actually wanted to spend time with her. Kelly must have overheard our argument. She stormed into the room and declared that everybody loved her, and I was Theon trying to take her friends away. I actually laughed and said, "If that's true, then why all these years has not a single one of my friends engaged with you when you posted in our group chat or called them?" Kelly looked wounded and started making excuses that everyone was just busy. I cut in. They were busy avoiding you because they're not your friends. Maybe that sounded harsh, but he wanted her to hear the truth. Dad started in about how selfish I was and how I owed Kelly an apology. I stood firm. She crossed a boundary by showing up where she wasn't invited. There were going to be consequences. That was the last straw, the final crack that broke whatever we had left. From then on, Kelly and I stopped talking and didn't even try to be polite at family gatherings. Years later, when I was getting married, My parents pushed me to invite her, saying Kelly would be devastated if I left her out, and they didn't want theirs of the family knowing about our rift. I sent the invitation reluctantly, and then they went further, pressuring me to make her a bridesmaid. That's where I drew the line and said I'd resend her invite altogether if they kept pushing. Thankfully, my husband Mark is loving and steady. Understood the history with my sister and never pressed me to involve her in our wedding. Over time, I learned to be civil with Kelly, but closeness never returned. Now to the incident. Kelly got married last week. Her husband Jason is 15 years older. She met him while she was working at a restaurant. Kelly never stayed long in any job and kept telling our parents she just wanted to get married. So Jason showed up like a knight in shining armor, and she was thrilled to finally settle down. I heard about the wedding from cousins and from our parents. No surprise, I didn't get an invitation. Honestly, I didn't mind. We don't have a good relationship anyway. But to my surprise, Kelly sent electronic invitations to all my friends through that old Facebook group I'd added her to years ago. I'd practically forgotten the group existed. Nobody really uses Facebook anymore. I was stunned she invited my friends she doesn't even talk to. A few of them reached out to ask if I was going. It told them Kelly hadn't invited me. They were shocked she'd invited them, but not me. I said I didn't care if they chose to attend. I have no relationship with her. Word must have spread because many others messaged me, outraged that she'd invite near strangers while excluding me, the person who used to look after her. I tried to make it clear I was fine with not being invited, but because Kelly publicly invited all my friends and not me, it felt to them like she was deliberately cutting me out. I brought it up with my parents and reminded them how they'd forced me to invite Kelly to my wedding for the family. Mom immediately defended her. The guest list was Kelly's decision, and had nothing to do with them. Feeling betrayed, I pointed out that she invited all my friends, which left everyone wondering why she'd so pointedly erased me. As usual, my parents took her side and said those people were her friends too, and she'd be glad if they came. I realized there was no point talking to them and dropped it. On the day of my sister's wedding, I spent time with my husband and our son. Mark knew I was a little upset, so he drove us to the beach and we had a great day. I turned my phone off. I like having no internet days when I'm with my family. When we got home, my phone lit up with messages and missed calls from my sister and my parents. Puzzled, I opened the latest text from Kelly with a photo attached. She wrote that it was all my fault, and she would never forgive me for ruining her wedding. The photo showed my friends. I gasped. They were wearing long, brightly colored dresses and looked absolutely ridiculous. One friend had a bright boa wrapped around her neck. Another wore a summer hat. For the record, a boa is a long, narrow scarf made of fur, feathers, or very light fabric worn as a fashion accessory. I couldn't understand why anyone would dress like that for a wedding. It looked more like a silly costume contest than a ceremony. I even smirked at how absurd it was. Kelly finally got me on the phone. She must have been trying all day, and the moment I answered, she started yelling that I was selfish and had ruined her wedding. I tried to calm her down, told her I had no idea why my friends dressed that way, but she kept accusing me of jealousy and of telling them to do it just to make her wedding a joke. I felt a flicker of pity for her, but I still didn't get why she was blaming me when I hadn't been involved at all. My parents chimed in with messages too, saying they were disappointed in me and that I should have stopped my friends from behaving like that, which of course is absurd. I don't know whether I should explain anything to them or just let them keep blaming me. I started to wonder if maybe my friends dressed like that precisely because they knew I wasn't invited. And maybe in some tiny way that was on me. Perhaps I should have spelled things out better. I caught myself thinking I was to blame for my friends turning my sister's wedding into a masquerade. Before we continue, let's pause and answer the author's question in the comments. To me, the answer is obvious. She isn't at fault here. It was her friends who chose to do what they did. Are the friends to blame? That's debatable. But the idea that the author is to blame, personally, I'd say 100% no. Then again, life rarely deals in absolutes, so maybe we can hunt for that percent of fault. Where could it be? Perhaps when she told her friends it was wrong for her sister to crash the reunion, and they took that to heart. But honestly, she was just stating her boundaries, which is not wrong. She tried to include her sister in her circle for years and it never worked out. As for the friends, they could have simply not shown up. That probably would have been the cleaner choice. On the other hand, they wanted to support someone who had clearly been slighted, and since Kelly had once barged in uninvited, they decided this was their way of pushing back. Good or bad, tell me what you think and let's move on. I talked it through with Mark, and we both agreed it needed to clear the air with my family. But first, I had to ask my friends for an explanation. By then, photos from Kelly's wedding had flooded social media feeds, and plenty of people already knew about the incident. I gathered my friends on a video call and asked why they had shown up dressed like that. To my surprise, one of them said it plainly. They chose those outfits as a quiet protest against Kelly's habit of inserting herself everywhere she wasn't wanted. Because the invitation didn't include a dress code, they took that opening to make a point. They admitted that over many years they'd grown tired of Kelly's persistent attempts to wedge herself into our circle, and that every now and then she'd also spoken poorly about me behind my back, something they obviously disliked. Even though they understood my parents had pushed me to drag Kelly along for years, they had still hoped she would eventually stop trying to latch on. She never did. Her crashing our reunion reminded them just how exasperating she could be, and when they learned Kelly had deliberately left me off the wedding guest list, they decided it was the perfect moment to teach her a lesson. It became clear my friends had always seen her motives for what they were and considered her more of a burden than a true friend. Their eccentric outfits at their wedding were a way to voice their frustration and give Kelly a quiet but unmistakable nudge. We are not your friends. When I told them Kelly was blaming me for the wedding fiasco, they apologized sincerely. They immediately offered to send a joint message, confirming the idea had been entirely theirs, taking any suspicion whatsoever off me. I thanked them for the support and said I didn't hold the outfits against them. Yes, the choices looked strange, but I understood the years of irritation behind it. I added that what mattered most to me was for Kelly and my parents to get the message about boundaries and stop blaming me for something I didn't do. After the call, my friends wrote to Kelly in our Facebook group explaining it had been their own idea and that I'd known nothing about it. I know Kelly read it because instead of replying to them, she called me and started shouting that I was trying to dodge a responsibility and manipulate my friends. She said her wedding was now a laughingstock in the family, and those ridiculous photos were making the rounds online. I understood why she was upset, so I kept my voice steady and explained. She couldn't blame me for what my friends chose to wear to a wedding I wasn't even invited to. I told her that even after my friends had openly admitted I had nothing to do with it, if she still chose not to believe it, there was nothing else I could do. I emphasized I never intended to ruin her day. My friends were expressing their frustration with years of intrusive behavior. Despite everything I said, it was obvious Kelly wouldn't accept any version that didn't match her beliefs. So I ended the call quickly. My husband thinks our parents can help her sort it out, but I'm doubtful. I don't know whether there'll be any help, but this weekend I plan to talk with them and see if they can de-escalate the situation. A week went by. As expected, talking to my parents didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. The moment I laid everything out, the accusations came down on me. They said I should have controlled my friends, implying that those strange outfits were in some way my responsibility. My attempts to explain that I hadn't known about any plan went nowhere. True to form, my parents took Kelly's side, voiced their disappointment in me, and insisted I should have warned her about my friends. I was baffled and told them I hadn't been involved at all. My friends did it without telling me, but my parents, like Kelly, refused to believe it. Feeling misunderstood and increasingly frustrated, I realized fixing this with my family would be far harder than I thought. The strained relationship with Kelly and my parents' constant bias in her favor didn't leave much hope for a fair outcome. Mark came with me to that conversation and stood up for me. He told my parents that I am not the kind of person who would stab someone in the back, especially not my own sister. He said that on Kelly's wedding day, we were out of town because we weren't invited and we had no idea any of it was going to happen. He underlined how unfair it was to accuse me without a shred of proof, Mom. Countered that maybe I'd prompted my friends to dress that way when I told them I hadn't been invited. Mark answered that I had in fact told my friends I was fine with not being invited and that their choices were entirely their own. I could see my parents weren't going to budge. So I told them if you refuse to believe me, there's no point in continuing this conversation. I also said that I had put up with my sister for years and taken care of her, but I wasn't going to be the family scapegoat anymore. I told them I'd decided to cut Kelly out of my life for good. Mom tried to argue, but Dad stopped her. We left after that, stepping back in the hope that time would cool things down and they'd eventually see the truth. Sadly, they still haven't reached out, which tells me they've chosen to stick with their version. It hurts to recognize that my parents clearly place my sister above me, even though I'm the one who always helped her. I don't know what comes next. But if they choose to back her, then so be it. Even if that's disappointing, I blocked Kelly, and for now, I plan to keep it that way. Months have passed since then, and a lot has changed. First of all, I started therapy. Many of you suggested it. I had a lot of old wounds, and I genuinely needed to put my feelings into words and let out what had built up. Therapy changed my life. I feel lighter now. I finally know how to express myself in a healthier way. And I'm confident I did the right thing when I stood up for myself around Kelly's wedding. Over these months, my parents have tried to make contact from time to time. But instead of clarifying anything or even offering an apology for all the accusations, they acted as if nothing had happened. It didn't take me long to realize they wanted just one thing: access to my son, their only grandchild. So, I cut them off completely. I don't want them to have any chance to treat my child the way they treated me. Meanwhile, Mark and I focused on our own life and leaned on each other. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Mark is a wonderful husband. He understands how hard it was to remove my parents from my life. But he has never once let me feel alone in that choice. We're planning a trip with Orson for the upcoming holidays. And here's what I can offer after everything I've learned. If you have a family member who is that toxic, please, for the sake of your mental health, remove that person from your life. Don't let them poison your days. Believe me, one day you will find someone who loves you exactly as you are. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your thoughts.